What you do is fascinating to me because it's one of the more interesting kinds of hunting where you go really deep in with animals. You bring in mules or horses, and you go very, very deep in to find these animals. And I think most people on the outside that think about hunting, they don't really understand how grueling it is, how unbelievably difficult it is to get, 15, 20 miles in.
Yeah.
And then if you do shoot an animal, to get that animal out is an unbelievable struggle.
Yeah.
And if you're talking about public land, it's really one of the best ways to find elk or to find really good elk.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, you have to, in a lot of these areas, people think about Colorado, Joe, and they think, so I hunted what technically would have been they say the White River elk herd is the largest elk herd in the world, right? So you have that perception that, you go there, you go into the flat tops or you go into the surrounding Forest Service property and you just put your backpack on, get off the road, and there's going to be elk everywhere. Well, it's a ton of habitat. And the thing about a lot of that country is all the habitat's good. You can go other places and they've got elk, but the only 10% of the actual habitat is going to hold elk, right? Well, the flat tops or, these big chunks of space in Colorado, it's all good elk habitat. Until you get massive amount of snow that limits the feed for elk. Elk could be everywhere. So what I'm getting to is they get crazy dispersed. And the only way to get into a lot of these areas is either backpacking, on your foot hiking, on your feet hiking, or you've got to pack in with horses and mules.
Do you guys go in and set up a wall tent?
Yeah.
And then are you there for weeks or months at a time? How do you do it?
Yeah. So if we're talking, if we're talking elk, the elk as a species, almost all of that was out of wall tent camps, and we packed those in. Now I did a fair amount of sheep and goat guiding too. Most of that we did out of backpacks, just because a lot of the habitat that mountain goats and sheep live in, it's not really conducive to packing with horses, just because you end up getting above timberline, and there's just some logistical reasons. A lot of times it's just better to backpack on them. But on elk, it's almost always you're packing in your camp with horses and mules, and then you're coming back in. Sometimes you'll hunt off foot. If the camp's in a situation where you can cover ground on foot and hunt, then you'll do it that way. But a lot of times you'll actually bring horses back in and hunt horseback too, and that's like a whole. People don't. Taking care of horses. If you got 15 horses and mules in camp, 12 miles back in the wilderness, it's, it feels like going back in time, man.
Yeah.
That's why, honestly, Joe, by the time I sold my main business 18 months ago. By the time I sold it, the majority of my crew was Amish.
Really?
Yeah.
Amish?
Yeah.
How did you find these guys?
Do they just,
because they don't use electricity, right? So
Yeah. So we get them online.
Can you get them online? Do they cheat?
So yeah. So, dude, I got some Amish buddies that I love, man, and I don't want to Mark, if you're listening, man, and you probably shouldn't be listening because you're Amish, but but no. So the answer to your question, man, is it just depends on what church they're from and the rules that they have established, and what they're doing. So if it's for business, a lot of them can use email. They can use a cell phone. Yeah.
Oh, what a hack.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. Then you're not Amish. That's the whole thing. You can't use fucking email.
Well, here's the deal. So they, I'm not an expert at them, but I became very good friends with some of them, because I had some of them work for me for 4 or 5 years, and man, there's some things about them that are absolutely amazing. You know what I mean?
Hardworking people.
Hardworking is an understatement, man. And the other thing that's wild about them is I had a lot of very young Amish guys come work for me, and we could get into the details of that. technically they hadn't like committed to the Amish church, so they weren't technically Amish yet.
Oh, was it the Rumspringer thing?
Yeah, they would be kind of in that process.
For people who don't know, they have like a time period of an indefinite time period where they're allowed to just run around and party and do drugs and sleep around, and then they have to come back to the church if they want to. Right.
And when they came out to my place, they didn't do any of that stuff other than work. But
wink.
But anyways, they would come out, and what I noticed, man, is if you take an 18-year-old Amish guy and you're just doing stuff around like ranch, because we were outfitting and guiding a lot of time, but we also had to manage the livestock, and we had kind of a ranch that we had to take care of. Those guys at 18, they know a ton because they've already been working for 7 years. You know what I mean? They know how to frame a door. They could show up to my place, Joe, and like they're wearing sandals and shorts, and you're thinking like, this guy's never been around livestock, and you be like, hey man, go grab that mule and saddle it. Every single one of them knew how to do it because they grow up catching horses and putting them on a buggy every day. So it's just wild that they learn all these skill sets that really early on. So in some ways, like I don't, from an education standpoint, none of them had a hard time communicating with me, or we always could get through all that. Maybe they didn't have as good as spelling, or they didn't have as good of like algebra skills or something because they missed out on some of that education, maybe. But I can tell you from a work ethic and like a hands-on skill set, they're amazing, man.